And now we return to our top story of the night, the fragile ceasefire between the U.S. and Iran and prospects for peace. And now joining me to discuss is Philippe Dickinson, Deputy Director at the Atlantic Council. Hello, and thank you so much for joining us on World News Tonight.
Thank you very much.
Now, the Strait of Hormuz is still largely closed. Only a handful of ships have made it through today. Do you expect that this will continue to be the case until the negotiations begin on Saturday in Pakistan, or at least until the situation is cleared up with the negotiations between Israel and Lebanon?
The Iranian leadership has learnt over the last few weeks that it has a real strong point of leverage over the global economy in the Strait of Hormuz. And that is leverage that it is not going to be willing to give up easily or quickly. And it knows that it can maximize this throughout the course of these negotiation processes. So I would expect that Iran continues to try and exercise as much control over the strait as it can, both to limit the ships of the countries that it doesn't want to get through and to sort of offer grace and favor passage through the strait to its friends and supporters from other parts of the world. So as long as the negotiations are continuing and until there is a fixed long-term concrete resolution to this crisis, the Iranians will look to play the Strait of Hormuz card as much as they can, quite frankly.
Do you think that for Donald Trump, isn't that conditional that the straits open in order to have this 2-week ceasefire?
There's a lot of conditions that the United States has tried to set, but they recognize the difficulty in achieving, in forcing the Iranians to open the strait as it was before the war began in February. There are a number of different issues on the table in the negotiations. Negotiation sort of diplomatic training 101 says that nothing is agreed until everything is agreed. And so if this is a precondition for starting negotiations, then I think it's going to be a tricky one for the US to compel the Iranians to do so. And there are lots of other things on the table in those negotiations: the future of Iran's nuclear program, its missile program, support for proxies, and the way it exports terror and aggression throughout the region more broadly. A whole host of different things on the table. We have just come to learn in recent weeks just how central the Strait of Hormuz is within the cards that Iran has in its hands.
Certainly. Now, Israel has announced it will negotiate with Lebanon on disarming Hezbollah. How will this weigh in on negotiations between the U.S. and Iran? And will this outcome dictate whether the ceasefire with Iran will be upheld or whether the Straits of Hormuz will be opened?
They're all very interwoven. It's a very messy and complicated picture. Trying to detangle one issue from another is going to be very, very tricky and complex. But I think it's very clear that the Iranians see a resolution and some sort of agreement on Lebanon as part of the overall package and framework for the wider peace negotiation with the United States, whereas the United States wants to kind of isolate these issues and take them each in turn. But I think it's going to be very hard to extricate those two and deal with them cleanly and neatly. I don't see a situation where the United States and Iran comes to a stable and enduring ceasefire deal if Israel is not signed on to that. And Israel very clearly sees continuing to prosecute the attacks against Hezbollah as part of this situation.
Yes. Now, with so much of the Iranian leadership now neutralized, what does the current leadership look like? Is it any less radical than the previous one that Trump was trying to get rid of? Is it fragmented? Is there a struggle for power?
Who knows? This is kind of classic Kremlinology. There is a supreme leader, Mujtaba Khamenei, Suspicions and rumors are that he was seriously injured or wounded in the initial strike that killed his father and killed other members of his family. He has been quiet except for a few statements, but he can live and exist in the ether as a cipher and as a symbol of the regime's continued survival and resistance to the United States. And what lies within, underneath that, it's hard to tell. It seems that there is some fragmentation, but that the IRGC, the Revolutionary Guard Corps, who are quite extremist and the militarized wing of the Iranian leadership, holds a lot of power and a lot of sway at the moment. So it would, if a leadership has suffered so many attacks and so many members of the leadership have been killed in strikes, it's hard to imagine that they would be any less extreme because they have survived and they have shown that they are more resilient than the United States and others may have expected. So I don't think you're going to find a sort of a becalmed and pacified Iranian leadership after this. I think likely the opposite.
Right, so not quite the outcome that was sought after in the initial stages of this operation. Now, if the straits stay closed, how much time does the global economy have before the situation causes a global recession?
That's hard to predict exactly, but I think we're at the point now where when the straits were closed, there was still, oil flowing through the global economy in the system that takes a few weeks to reach ports around the world. We're getting to the point now where the reality is of constrained supply is really going to catch up unless a situation is come to quite quickly and things are reopened quickly. So if this continues for a lot longer, I think you are going to see escalating economic fallout from this. And that is going to be driving a lot of the tempo around the negotiations. And that is a big part of what gives Iran so much leverage. They have learnt that they can inflict this control, this damage over the global economy, and the knock-on repercussions of that are vast and extensive, affecting every bit of the global economy.
They are, and at the same time, Donald Trump thinks that he has leverage over Iran with these grave threats of destroying an entire civilization. How much leverage does Donald Trump and his administration have with these threats in the event that they can't negotiate something or come to an agreement?
Well, I think it's important to kind of go on the record and say that the threats to, destroy Iranian civilization were completely beyond the pale, and the kind of language that I don't think anybody really would have expected and anticipated. And I think it reveals a good degree of frustration that the president is feeling, that the situation has somewhat gotten out of control. It is not an unfamiliar tactic from the president's playbook to ratchet up threats to try and compel action in line with US interests. They may well say, look, we've achieved a ceasefire within 24 hours of that statement being made, so it worked. I don't know how many times you can continue to make those sort of threats and to get the response that you want from the adversary sat across the other side of the table.
NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte is in Washington talking with Donald Trump. What do you think the best course of action is for the Europeans? Should they sit on the sidelines and wait this out and see what happens, or should they get involved in some way?
Europeans clearly don't want to get involved. They've been very emphatic in stating that this was not their war, that this was a war of choice of the United States and Israel, and that the Europeans were not consulted on it. But Obviously, we are all living with the repercussions, economic and geopolitical. And given the state of President Trump's disappointment and anger with European allies for not responding exactly as he would have wished for them to, this does play into the future of the transatlantic relationship more broadly. And I think it is in European interests to try and demonstrate to the president and the White House that, okay, we are respecting your concerns around the nature of the Iranian regime. We want to contribute to peace and stability and a global prosperity. And so we will try and figure out some sort of resolution that will keep the Strait of Hormuz open. You're seeing different European leaders trying to play that role and take up that mantle and play a constructive role. It's a very, very difficult problem. It's not a problem that the Europeans welcome, but it's now one that they've got to grapple with.
Yep. Well, one day at a time, one day at a time. Philippe Dickinson, Deputy Director at the Atlantic Council, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
And that concludes this edition of World News Tonight. Thank you for watching. Have a great evening, and we'll see you next time. Good night.